are here. And I think maybe there's a couple of preliminaries that we can get out of the way early, and we do have a lot to talk about today, so maybe we should get started. I'm Dan Passamanik. I'm the staff lead on partnership grants this year. I'm senior program analyst with the Office of Access and Inclusion, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Christine Holmes, and I believe Catherine is here. Although yes, I can't see everybody. Hi, Ryan, I'm sorry. I couldn't see everybody at the same time. And our interim co-manager, Elizabeth Hong. We're here to go through the policy questions and recommended allocations for partnership grants. And at this very moment, my family is unpacking our groceries in the only part of the house that has great Wi-Fi. So forgive me if I stumble a little bit. Christine, could you give us the next page of our agenda, and let's see where we start.
Actually, Dan, can we have Vicki give some of our housekeeping rules first?
I apologize, Elizabeth, thank you, yes. Vicki Avila is also here, program coordinator, and she is gonna help us use this technology the right way. I'm handing it over to Vicki. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Partnership Grants Committee meeting. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please type "I have a comment" or "I have a question" in the chat, and a message will be sent to myself, the host. Alternatively, you can also use the raise hand feature, and we'll get your question or comment in queue. In efforts of transparency for all those joining this meeting, whether by Zoom or phone, we just request that you refrain from having any side conversations on chat. So just about the content of the meeting, excuse me. And again, the chat feature is utilized just as a tool for you to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. Duan Nguyen had sent out a message yesterday to the full commission, just informing everyone that going forward, all Legal Services Trust Fund commissions and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. So that is currently being recorded right now. And then just another friendly reminder that this is a video conference and to please be aware of your surroundings. For those of you using Zoom, when you're on mute, if you hold down the space bar, that will temporarily unmute you. If you're on the phone to dial in, please be sure that your computer's microphone is on mute just to avoid any audio feedback. And lastly, while joining audio via computer is highly recommended. If you lose any audio, you can call in separately using the Zoom conference number. And with that, that's it.
I have a quick question. How does one raise their hand?
Using the phone. I'm assuming you're on your phone. If you just if you tap like the screen, there should be like a little raise hand feature and a little chat, or a little raise hand icon and another chat icon.
I'm not sure I'm seeing those myself on my screen.
I don't have it either. It's called reactions, and it's usually there, but it's not.
You know what? In participants, I see in participants there's an option for me to raise hand. Okay.
I don't think.
I see it now.
Oh, I see it. Yes. Oh. So click participant. You get that screen on the side, and then at the bottom right, you have that option. Thank you so much. Okay, Vicki, that was extremely helpful. Thank you. Let's see, participants, I gotta click that off now. It is time for us to take roll and make sure that everyone who has to be here is here. So I'm going to open a roll call chart, and I think that Christine is also going to be tracking this along with me. Is Christina Vanarelli present?
Yes.
Kim Bartleson?
Yes.
Will Boschelli?
Here.
Deborah Myers? Chris Shriver. We do have quorum. That's 4 out of 5 voting members. Judge Jaskell. Justice Murray. And Justice Murray did tell me he would be about a half an hour late today. I'm going to just put a star right now on both of those because I think he's coming back, but I'm not going to mark him here yet.
Dan, I have a 213 number, so I'm just going to allow them to talk to see if it's Judge Murray.
It might be Judge Jaskell.
I'm here. This is Judge Jaskell. Can you hear me?
Yes. Excellent. Good morning, Judge Jaskell. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Also, on our roll call chart today are the LAC liaison, Selena Copeland. Did I hear that Lauren Klein was here on behalf of LAC today?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, good morning, Lauren.
Good morning.
Lauren, do you know if Selena's going to be joining us?
No, Selena's currently at the eligibility meeting instead.
Of course.
We're
Thanks.
splitting this morning.
Bonnie Huff.
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning, Bonnie.
Good morning.
Deborah Manning, our Board of Trustees liaison. Chris Iglesias, also Board of Trustees liaison. For State Bar staff, this is Daniel Passamanic, Elizabeth Hong, Bryn Borgeson, Christine Holmes, and Brady Dewar. Is that right, everybody?
Yep, we're all here.
And is there anyone else who wishes to identify themselves as attending this meeting this morning?
Sorry, Dan, can I think you said there were 4 voting members, is that?
We have 5 voting members right now. We used to have 6, but Susan Ryan resigned, which leaves us with 5. Does that mean that we have a quorum of 3 people?
We have 3. I think you said 4, but we have 3.
Yeah, I just wanted, sorry, that was what I was double checking. Thank you.
I'm sorry. We have 3 people on a 5-person committee, a committee with 5 voting members. We have quorum. Thank you. And with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to our chair, Christina Vanarelli, to begin with item 2 of our agenda, the call for public comment.
All right. Well, I will call for public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to be heard at this time? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is approval of the action summary from our last meeting.
This is an action item. So another roll call vote. I'm going to make sure that we have a good call on here for that.
Have a motion?
So motioned.
Will?
Yes.
I'll second, Christina. Any discussion? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Christina.
Yes.
Tim Barlson.
I'll abstain. I wasn't able to attend the meeting.
Thank you. Will Bichelli.
Yes.
Deborah Myers is not here, so I will not ask her opinion. And Chris Shriver is not here. So we not sure that the motion has passed given the number of people who are here.
I think,
2 yes votes.
did the folks who made the motion and second, did they vote?
Yes, they did. We have 2 yes votes and 1 abstention, 1 person who just 2 people who aren't here.
So it's my understanding that even if you're not present for a meeting, so long as you've reviewed the notes and action summary and agree with it, you know, you can vote for it.
I'm not used to that process, but I have reviewed it and I will change my vote to approve.
Thank you so much. We have approval. And I think that we may be ready to move to the next frame of, thank you, Christine, to item 4.
Okay.
And at this point, may I briefly step in?
Yes,
I
please, Dan.
hope briefly, but we have today 2 kind of general areas to discuss. We have some policy, or I should say administration matters for the grants that we're working on now. And then there's actually making some choices about what our recommendations are going to be. But before we get into all of that, on the next frame, if you would switch us down one more, there's one question that was raised during our last meeting that I think we've got some more information about. So Brady Dewar has joined us from the Office of General Counsel to help us frame our approach toward this question of expungement. And I was hoping we could turn to him for a few minutes to hear what he has to say about this.
Sure. Sorry, I just had to step out for a minute. Could you just what was your preamble? Anything?
The lead-in.
Hey,
this was a question that came up last time.
This is Elizabeth. May I step in?
Certainly, yes.
So at our last meeting, Justice Murray brought up the question of whether partnership grants should be funding expungements. And so we asked Brady to do a legal analysis of that. And so Brady, if you could provide what you've found, and then I can follow up and let you know what our plan is for our applications that have expungement pieces in them.
Sure. So essentially, this is an issue that's come up with partnership grants, but also with some of our IALTA grantees. There's so expungement is actually a criminal proceeding. It is something that the way that you get an expungement is you go back into your original criminal case, and it's part of that same docket. And in the IALTA statute, a portion of the IALTA statute, which does not apply to partnership grants, states Business and Professions Code 6223B states that no IALTA grant funds shall be used to support provision of legal assistance in criminal proceedings. So let's set that aside for a minute. That comes up for the IALTA grantees. But for partnership grants in the Budget Act states that the funds allocated shall be used for the provision of assistance in civil legal matters for the indigent. Because expungement is a criminal matter, not a civil legal matter, the funds allocated pursuant to the Budget Act should not be used for expungement work. Apparently, that's been overlooked a little bit in the past, but I think that Elizabeth will fill us in on the details, but it looks like there are just a few programs where this would come up for now, and it's a very small portion of their work, so we should be able to sort of resolve the disconnect there.
Yeah, so as Brady was saying, there are 4 applications this year that have expungement pieces to them. Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara and Community Legal Aid SoCal, their projects, I think we'll probably be able to go back to them and ask them to carve out that piece. It sounds like they're relatively small pieces to their projects. Legal Aid of Marin, while they have a community partner that actually does the expungements for their project is a community court focusing on resolving traffic infractions to restore driving rights. So I think staff will have to take a closer look at this to see if this is appropriate, because it could be interpreted as like a quasi traffic court, which may be an issue. So we'll take a closer look at that and report back. And then the last one is Lisnick Legal Services in Northern California. They're proposing a new piece related to expungement, and it sounds like they're proposing with this new piece expungement and a housing new piece. So I think we can probably go back to them and ask them to carve it out. So that's our plan to move forward. And then we will report back to the committee with what we find and whether that's possible for these applicants.
Can I get some clarification?
Sure.
Since it's a criminal proceeding, does that mean public defenders are able to be used by defendants to pursue an expungement?
I think that varies county by county, but
Right.
From our discussions, including with Brendan Stallings, who's a DA in Kern County, in a lot of counties, the public defenders are providing that service.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I had no idea. And it sounded like there was a little bit of discussion there at the end, Elizabeth, on the traffic court. I think maybe you're referring to Marin County. That was mine.
Mm-hmm.
They're responding to fast track. They're helping with fast track violations, I think. And those would be considered criminal proceedings as well, is what you're saying?
It could possibly be. I mean, right now they're in a community court. And so I think we just need to get a little bit more information, what that means in Marin County.
Okay, so there's no distinction, like, I think, I'm not an expert on law, so between infractions and like the civil infraction idea, like, oh, I've gotten a parking ticket or any of that, that's all would be ineligible.
I think there's been a question of whether traffic court is civil or criminal. And I think that's what we need to look more closely at. And,
okay,
and you know, for Legal Aid of Marin, their court is calling it a community court. And so we just want to make sure we understand what's happening there.
Okay, yeah, I would love to be more informed on the analysis there as well, because it seemed to fit the goals of these grants, but if it doesn't, I would like to understand how it's not. So thank you.
Great.
This is Kim. One of the things I think that needs to be investigated a bit more, because infractions do not all align with criminal activities, is maybe as it's being vetted, to if there's a way to isolate the types of infractions that would truly distinguish between criminal and civil. And if there's the ability for us to isolate the criminal, then that might afford some opportunities in the infraction world for people to get their licenses back if we're able to have the funding go for those assistants.
Absolutely. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this issue? I know Justice Murray had raised it and he's not on the call, but we can maybe circle back with him later.
Okay. Shall I keep going?
Let's do it. Christine, can we see our next slide, please? You know, this is really just a recap. We wanted to share with people how we got to where we are today, just to refresh recollections. We did a grant in April. We heard from 90% of our recipients. Most of them expect to have money left over at the end of the year. Most of them are changing what they are doing, what they had been doing and had put in their application to us. And although they're currently seeing really low demand for service, they're expecting that, many are expecting that to spike when the shelter-in-place orders are lifted. Could we have our next slide, please? Thank you. With that in mind, we looked at our timeline and asked ourselves whether we had some flexibility to look again at the proposals that seemed most promising to make sure that we understood what they looked like now. Our timeline today would have us approving a list of recommendations and sending them up to the Trust Fund Commission for approval. We're going to recommend not doing that. We have until September 24th to, we have to get our recommendations to the Judicial Council in time for them to approve them on September 24th. So if we could have the next slide for a moment. So it looks like we have time to look at the applications one more time. And that's what we're recommending doing. We'd like to find a date sometime in the middle of July when we could put maybe 3 hours on the calendar. I hope we don't need to use them all, but it would be an opportunity for us to make sure that we've heard from the programs about what the project's going to look like after COVID strikes. We would report back to the committee at that time. You could review the recommendations and approve them as appropriate. We could get them to the Trust Fund Commission in August, and they could get it to the Judicial Council in September. It's a tight timeline, but with the number of projects we have and you know, the staff we've got who are really good, I think that we'd be able to do it. So that is our recommendation. And I'd like to pause for a second and ask if people have any questions about any of this.
So just to kind of recap, my understanding is that ordinarily we would be approving at this meeting recommended amounts for each grant, but because of COVID, and we know for a fact that a lot of these programs are not going to be operating the way as set forth in their application. So this will give staff some time. We'll come up with our numbers and hopefully they'll stick, but this will give staff the opportunity to reach out to the programs and just make sure that they're not changing something so drastically that we have to relook at their proposal. And am I correctly stating that, Dan, the essence of your recommendation?
I wish I'd put it that way. Could we see the next slide? I think that might just reiterate what you just said. Yeah, we're gonna take what we learned today, reach out to every project with a tentative recommendation, offer them the opportunity to revise their application and ask what it's going to look like. We will compile that information for you, get it to you in time to get it to the commission.
So is everybody okay with that plan? It means we have to meet one more time after staff does their contacting of all of the programs to just make sure that what we're recommending is what we really are recommending.
So this means we'll be getting an update before that next meeting on changes and modifications to the grant proposals?
Yes, that's right. Pretty much we'll have to reach out next week and give programs a fairly short timeline to let us know, generally speaking, what are we looking at? And we'll get that back to you in time to review it.
So go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just looking at the calendar.
Okay.
So.
Will this be enough time for them to actually have an understanding where it result in changes that are going to be meaningful, or?
There are a handful of projects that haven't launched yet. So I think that those would maybe be a little bit more hypothetical, but almost all of the other projects are already in operation. I think that we're talking about what have you done already, not what do you plan to do.
All right, that sounds very reasonable to me.
Good.
Okay.
Could we get our next slide, please? We're going to, I believe, be able to administer this part of the application review process pretty much as an administrative process. So there's no vote needed on this, but I appreciate the voicing of consensus, or at least no voicing of objection.
And Dan, you're referring to the meeting and not what's on the current slide, right?
Correct, yes. This is the idea of application administration, not the carryover policy. We're now on agenda item 4B, which is a little bit more complicated because there is policy in place on this, and we will need to make a recommendation to the commission. As a very brief recap, IOLTA and EAF grants have a different carryover policy than partnership grants. Partnership grants have a very restrictive policy, and pretty much we deny them unless the project isn't going to get funded again. This is because we find that projects that don't spend down but get to carry forward and get another grant wind up with extra money they don't need. But it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen this year. Could we have the next slide, please? As we saw from the survey results, most of the programs are going to have some money left over, which is unusual. And a lot of them are going to have a fairly significant amount of money. They're also seeing that demand for services is low, but they expect it to get higher, and they expect the cost of providing those services potentially to rise because of the challenges of service delivery at this time. So we talked about being more generous this year in our approach toward carryovers, to consider requests from any grantee, not just the ones that aren't requesting another grant, to permit the spend down over the full year, following year, on the same services at the same location. And while we would retain discretion to review on a case-by-case basis, the general approach would be toward liberal interpretations. Before we go any further, I just want to pause and ask if there's any questions about how we got here or what we're talking about. Excellent. Could I have the next slide, please? Thanks. We do have a vote to be taken on this question, and I want to pull up my roll call sheet here for it. The motion is, I'm sorry, could we go back one? I want to make sure that I do this right. This is the staff recommendation, and if we want to advance it to the commission for their approval, we'll need to vote on it formally. So I'm hopeful that we could do that now.
I would move that we adopt the staff recommendation regarding carryover requests.
Kim seconds.
That's great.
Discussion? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Christina Vanarelli?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Kim Bartleson?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Will Bichelli?
Looks frozen.
I've had days like that. I'm going to put a couple of asterisks here because I think that we might need to come back and hear what he has to say. And I'd like to keep the, oh, there's a WB. Mr. Bichelli, have you joined us? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
You can, yes. Welcome back.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I can hear you.
Wonderful. The motion is to approve staff's recommendation regarding carryovers.
Yeah, I had just a question on that. My reading of many of the grants is that it's very highly regimented in scheduling, and I guess I'm curious how the carryover is going to be utilized. Maybe not too much in specifics, but in terms of if you only have 3 people there, are they going to hire another person? Just a general idea of how they're going to be able to utilize that.
I think it's an important question, and we don't have that answer. It's really a question of who do we want deciding how that money gets spent. The projects right now seem to be anticipating an increase of cost of delivery and potentially the need to expand hours or something else like that. As their costs go up, this money would come in handy. We don't know for sure exactly what that's going to look like, or if it's even going to happen.
And I would add that when a grantee makes a request, they would provide that information that you're asking for.
Okay, and then would that be passed along at some point? or is it just the staff reviews it, and if it seems reasonable, it's a go?
The policy recommended is to review on a case-by-case basis. So I think that anything that we thought would, we are anticipating a lot of these requests are going to come in at low levels for ongoing projects, and they're going to have a good plan for spending down. But there may be some that are more significant, and we don't intend to rubber stamp. If there's reason to look more closely or to make a different decision, reviewing generously doesn't mean to approve unanimously.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, okay.
And go ahead, Elizabeth. Thank you.
The committee does review the requests.
Thank you. I'm glad to vote in favor of the motion here.
Excellent, thank you. We have 3 yes votes and 2 absent commission members, so committee members. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. Let's see, staff recommendation. Christine, thank you for your patience. Could we thank you again? We're making great time. We've already reached agenda item 4C, a discussion of the remaining proposals that we haven't made a decision about yet. And I'd like just to pause for a second, ask if at this point there's anything else that people want to go back to or raise before we get into the nitty-gritty of the individual proposals?
I'm confused. I thought we had to take a vote on the delaying, or is that we just decide not to take action on the recommendation and it's automatically delayed?
That's pretty much it, yeah. This is our administrative choice more than a matter of policy.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And yeah, that's a pretty fine line. Before we talk about how we want to allocate the funding that is left, I'd like to take just a very brief moment to review where we are. There were 35 applications. They asked for a total of, let's see, $2.895 million. We think that we have, where our estimated amount for distribution is $2.45 million. We went through the 35 proposals and came up with a tentative allocation for quite a few of them. There are 18 for which there is no tentative, there's an allocation range, but I think the remainder, we've got a kind of a recommended number. For the rest, we'll need to figure out where on the range we want to recommend a tentative funding level. And our basis for making those decisions are these 3 areas on the PowerPoint. Our eligibility criteria to consider when determining how much to recommend, and then the priorities for funding. If we go down to the next slide, I'd like to just kind of recap these briefly so that we're all using the same vocabulary. All of these projects must be proposed by QLSPs. They must be joint projects delivered at or near the courthouse with their local courts or with a local court. They must be services for indigent persons who are self-represented civil litigants. It sounds like a fairly straightforward list. As you heard earlier, some of these words really do require a lot of unpacking. But thanks, Christine. Can we get to the next slide? Thanks. There are a lot of projects that meet all those criteria. So in determining what the funding level should be, here are the points that are taken into consideration: the impact, the collaboration, the court's impartiality. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but if we could get to the next one, please. The next slide, thank you. The priorities for funding is where we figure out which projects to put first, which to consider before others. Our determinations so far have been on the basis of priority levels that were established by this committee last year. Those levels are no longer binding on us. We have discretion to adjust them if we wish, but staff have reviewed where we landed, and looks like there's no necessary change to be made. The first priority for funding is seed funding for new projects. After that, we also want to make sure there's funding for projects in their second and fifth year, projects serving rural areas, projects that respond to a recent emergency or disaster, and high functioning, heavily utilized projects that have proven that they just can't raise outside funding. With all those criteria in mind, we still have discretion to make different choices and to consider, for example, request an excess of 5 years together with this also prioritized list. Before we get into the next pieces, are there any questions about where we are now? Christine, excellent work on the PowerPoint agenda. I don't think we're quite ready for our last slide, but could you possibly bring up that funding recommendations Excel sheet?
And for the committee members, I think you will find helpful to refer to attachment F of the memo.
Sorry, Dan, it was in my remote. It's just going to take me a minute to log in.
Oh, I totally understand. I'm sorry. I'm now doing Zoom on a computer that has no Microsoft Word suite, so I can't actually put anything.
So while we're waiting for that, Dan, why don't you explain what we're going to do with this Excel spreadsheet?
Thank you. What we will see is a spreadsheet that shows all the projects by name, how much they requested, and where their funding range is. We've got them sorted by priority levels. First, the highest priority, and last, the ones that are not otherwise prioritized. We have a handful here that are in the first category, and I'm going to suggest that we might want to follow the priority rankings when we talk about the projects, so that we can see whether there's a recommended allocation for each one of them. And then when we get down to the ones that are not prioritized, we'll know how much funding we have. Christine, if you could scroll down for a moment to the bottom of the screen, or the table, I want to show people this is where we are. 2.895 has been requested. Those next two numbers represent our ranges. We've allocated a low of 1.9, a high of, is that 2.66? And that means that on the low side, we have over 500,000 to spend, but on the high side, we've got to cut 211,000. We've currently allocated $1.02 million based on the allocations that we've already kind of come up with a single number. And we're going to pause for a second and ask if any of the allocations that had previously been provided in the recommended allocations, if anybody had any questions about those from the meeting materials, because I'd like to sort of move forward with the ones that are filled in on this far right column. These are the ones where the recommended low and high are the same. In every one of these, we had an agreement, and I'm hopeful that we can move to the ones where we still have a range. For example, here at the top, we see neighborhood legal services. The low was a 0 and the high was over $100,000. So we'll have to figure out how to fill that in.
And I just want to add that the rankings and the dollar amounts or based on the discussion that the committee had in May? Just to be clear.
Okay. And Christine, we have a request. Could you maybe expand the size of the table there with the slider, maybe at the bottom right, so that you can, whatever it is, so that maybe a little bit easier to see. But there's only one item in the approved group that I think does demand a little bit of attention. We talked about the Motherlode project already, and we have approved, or not approved, but recommended a grant of, I believe, $91,000 for them. Let's see, $95,000. And this is a project that has a much larger budget than our funding. Their budget is, I think, over $200,000, and we're down at 95. So it seems as if it wouldn't to use our funding for this project, for this part of the project. But
Dan, we lost you for a couple seconds. Could you repeat that last sentence?
I'm sorry. It sounds like there's enough money, enough other money in this project that we could simply require them not to use ours for expungement and still be able to keep the $95,000 allocation recommendation. But I wanted to check to see if there were other concerns but before we just move forward with that.
Dan, can you let us know which project you're talking about again?
This would be Legal Services in Northern California, the Motherlode project, where the $95,000 is identified toward a lot of different kinds of services, but the project is also going to bring on some very specific expungement services. And it looks like there's plenty of money in their budget for that out of other sources. So I would just recommend that our approval of that sum would be, you know, not conditional upon, but we would have to let them know about this requirement and that this funding couldn't be used for that.
So Dan, are you suggesting that we decrease that amount to help our calculations right now?
Well, I'm actually not suggesting that. I think that the project needs the funding for all of the other services that it provides.
I mean, I think I think if we want to keep the funding amount at 95,000, I think it would be probably the best practice if we went back to them and asked them what they thought the amount of time and resources they were planning to use on the expungement, because it is in their application very clearly that they're developing new materials and are spending other resources on it. So I think it would probably be best if we maybe keep 95,000, but go back to them and say, hey, if you carved out expungement, how would that change the budget? Because they may say, oh, actually, we think, they may know it's, you know, X amount of staff hours and this sort of thing. And then they'll be able to like take out, you know, whatever dollar amount. And then maybe that then could be what their allocation is.
I wouldn't be surprised if they actually had a separate source of funding for this, but that's an inquiry that gets built into the process that we just approved to go back to the programs and say, what's it going to look like? We would certainly ask them. You can't use this money for expungement. What's that going to look like?
Dan, this is Bonnie. I think another thing for us to think about in terms of the allocations is that the most recent information that I have regarding the state budget is that the 10% cuts that we were anticipating for the equal access funds are potentially not going to be included. And so that would give us another $100,000. roughly for partnership grants.
Wow. That's exciting.
And I haven't seen a final budget yet.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to count my chickens or anything, but is there a sense of what the timeline is on knowing?
My understanding is the legislature is going to vote on it today and the governor's going to sign on Monday.
Oh, okay. So imminent.
Yeah. Yeah, I can check in with Selena. Just, yeah, it does make a difference, obviously.
Bonnie, this is Lauren, and
yes.
I can confirm your understanding that they removed that 10% cut that had initially been in there. So that's good. And yes, things have to happen quickly because the budget has to be signed by the end of the month. So we will know for certain very soon.
Does that mean that we should be working on a presumption of a $2.55 million pool or corpus? Because we were working on 2.45 before.
Right.
Or should we come up with an alternate scenario?
Well, it sounds like it's going to happen.
Yeah, it does sound like it's going to happen.
So let's
it seems like a safe assumption.
Hmm?
So yeah, thank you, Christine. That's you're on it. I'm going to do that over here on my version as well. So that's a. So that certainly does give us more room to work with. Thank you. That's great news. We still need to figure out how to spend it. So perhaps we could scroll to the top of the chart. And I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that there's 6 projects that still have a range here in group 1. And I think some of them are going to be easier to talk about than others. But we have, in alphabetical order, a Central California Legal Services Guardianship Project, the Central California Tenant Landlord Housing Project, Inland County Legal Services Consumer Rights Clinic, the Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara County's Legal Resource Center Partnership, and then Neighborhood Legal Services Stabilizing Families Project. Oh, I'm sorry, and one more, San Luis Obispo County's Rental Clinic. So there are a couple of these that are really new projects and I think easier to talk about. And there are some of these that are essentially repackaged projects or legacy projects that are coming back, and maybe more of a conversation happens with them. But if there's no objection, could we maybe start with a low-hanging fruit here on tier 1 and talk about, well, are there any of these that people would wish to talk about first?
Well, I have a suggestion. There are,
yes, please.
I mean, I love this chart. Crystal made it. Is that what you told me, Dan?
Yes, Crystal
awesome.
Put this together.
So we've got all the priority number 1s. I mean, my thought is there's a couple of them where we've got 0 on the low end. Mm-hmm. So we need to talk about those. And the rest of them, unless there's something glaring, I would suggest plug in the high numbers because they're all priority. Plug in the high end of the range. And then we can knock out these priority number 1s.
Yeah, it certainly seems if we're going to cut, we should start with the priority 3s if we're honoring the priority levels.
We should start with the 3s?
We should pass the 3s.
In terms of cutting funding, my understanding is priority 1, we want to do our best to meet that funding level.
Yes.
And then end up cutting from the lower priority, or sorry, I guess
no, yeah. That's
on
right.
how you view it. Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing. So get the number 1s done and then move on to the 2s. And if there's any money left, the threes can have it.
Can I raise a question about that in relationship to Inland County's Legal Services?
Yes.
And that is, I have never known this agent of this group to offer more than $120,000 in a grant. And I kind of think that if you're going to start to do that, then you should have let everybody else know that they could ask for that kind of money. So that's just one thought about it, which is not to say that it's not a great project or whatever, but and I know this was one that Justice Murray worked on, and had some it's a had some issues with, but I'm just a little bit sensitive about just saying that they should get the top of the row without the top that they've asked for without some discussion.
My
They have
understanding
zero
was
at
that
the
ones
bottom,
that,
though.
the ones that have a 0 on the bottom, we're going to come back to, but the ones where
Okay.
there's actually a
Right.
range, between a $15,000 or $20,000 difference or something. My understanding was we would just look at those and fill in the upper one. So, for example, the Central California Legal, we could fill those in, but we wouldn't go to the Neighborhood Legal Services because that has a 0 at the bottom. Would that be right? So, Christine, could
Yeah.
you work with me? I'm going to do this on mine as you do it on yours, but that'll be a $60,000 for the Fresno Guardianship Project. 60,000.
Before we get too far into the numbers, I just want to clarify what I heard was that there's a top level to the funding amount that we've given, and there's a sort of expectation among the grantees of what they can ask for, because that does seem like a question of equity in terms of how high we want to go.
We don't have an official.
Can I say something on this, Dan? Hi, I'm on the call now. Sorry, I had another matter I had to address this morning.
Welcome, sir.
And I don't know if you saw that my email to you, Dan, but this morning. But
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay. So I should have gotten back to you. I realized last night when I was prepping for today, I didn't. But my recommendation on the ICLS program is 0 to 94,000. And I arrived at that by going to their budget and backing out some of the things I think they wanted us to fund that essentially supplanted what they were already doing, and backing out the $34,000 that they asked to create the
Right, I remember that.
application. And there were a couple other minor things, like I think they had like $18,000 or something for space or something like that. I backed that out. So the main expense that I included in that was for a paralegal and benefits associated with that paralegal. I think they calculated their benefits at 28.4% or something. So I took the amount that they showed for the paralegal and added 28.4% for benefits for that person. My assumption, and I don't really know this for sure, I don't think we asked, it didn't dawn on me to ask, but my assumption is that's a paralegal that doesn't already exist or is doing something else and can do this program. So I thought it made sense to include that, but that's the major expense for this program. I gave them all the money they wanted for that travel and all the other things related to their students that would be involved. So it kind of totaled up to a little bit short of 94,000. And that sort of obviates the discussion about having to talk about the equity associated with making a request beyond 125,000.
The RFP itself does describe that the grants are usually between $20,000 and I think $80,000. People do ask for more, and we've occasionally given more, but it's pretty unusual. Typically there's a big deliverable at the end that we expect to have a statewide impact. It's not our practice, not actually a rule against it. But I think that what Justice Murray suggests is a very elegant approach. I think, is there any further discussion about the idea of a $94,000? And Justice Murray, to let you know what we're looking at here, this is a chart that Crystal Bundang put together for us to help us look at the projects for which we don't yet have a funding recommendation. We still have a range. We've organized them by tiers of analysis, and we're looking at the first tier so that we can make sure they get as much as they deserve before we run out of money. The first step was just where there was a little bit of a gap. I
was going to say, I was a little surprised to see this program in that first tier because
unfortunately it's a new service, so technically it is
that's what put it in the first tier. Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't this the one where they're paying their own person to be a vendor?
Yes. They were going to bring in someone from the UCI Consumer Law Clinic who would, she's already kind of doing that work, but she was going to build a piece of software and then work with the volunteer students to come out, you know, a dozen or so times a year to work on the clinic.
And she was going to get paid for that.
There was a budget, a lot of money in the budget for it. I don't know if she was going to get paid, but there was money in the budget for it.
Well, the way I understood it was she was going to be the one to develop that software. And at the same time, she is the attorney that's associated to the budget line item for an attorney. So my perception was that she's already working for UCI, asking us to fund her salaries, supplanting that. And then we had already talked about the idea that we weren't going to fund the development of the app. So I backed out the numbers that relate to those two things in addition to some other things. So that's how I ended up arriving at the 94,000.
That's really helpful, thank you. And there's one piece of news I don't know if you were here to hear, but Bonnie let us know and Lauren confirmed that it looks like we have been excluded from the 10% cut in the May revise. So
I did hear her say that, and I was multitasking when she said it, and I thought I didn't hear that right. So I'm glad you confirmed that, because that's obviously very unexpected, but really good news. So.
You know, for me, it's both great because we have more to spend, but also gratifying that there would be an understanding of the value of this and a willingness to make a carve out for this.
That's a good point.
It moves me, you know, I'm a little choked up, but without getting over emotional, we still have to talk about, I think there's only one more project in tier 1 that is technically a new service, but we don't have an allocation for it. And it's a 0 to 113 for neighborhood legal services and their stabilizing families project. This is the project that proposed services in Van Nuys and Antelope Valley to serve guardianship litigants. And the reason there's a big gap is that
hey, before we move on, was ICLS at 94,000?
Oh,
that's my recommendation, 0 to 94, yes.
And should we, at that point, because we're talking about assigning the high recommendation once we are comfortable with the range, should we just put that into our far right column?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. The reason I'm at 0 as the low range is I just don't have a comfort level with the application and what they told us. It seems clear they're trying to supplant some money they were already spending for personnel here, and I guess I have a credibility concern regarding them. So that's why I said 0 to 94. And part of my thinking on that was that our funds were going to be limited. And if they're not, maybe we just go ahead and take a chance on them. I don't know. But
well, they're less limited. Let's not limited. But.
All right. So that's the reason for 0. It's more a policy determination that we can trust them for 0. than anything related specifically to what they said they were going to do.
Well, that doesn't need to.
One real quick, Kim Bartleson had her hand raised.
Yes, there's been a lot of background noise, so it's washing out whoever's talking. Just a FYI.
Thank you. I think I heard what was said. If there's anything that we need to make sure gets recovered, was there a point that got missed? It sounds like we have a recommendation from Justice Murray to put in 94,000 for ICLS, and it's largely a matter of confidence in the organization for having put together an application that includes some really questionable items, not about the services that they can provide.
That's right.
And William Bocelli has a question and has his hand raised.
Yeah, apologies. I forgot about the hand raising protocol here. On ICLS, there's nothing to indicate that their app that they would like to develop is going to be for multiple agencies. It's just for their agency use, right?
They don't talk about it being for general use, but that is one of the terms of the grant. And if they come up with something, we would want it to be scalable. But they're also talking about working with this individual, Claire Raba, who has been working on this project for quite a long time. She was with Bay Legal and their consumer law clinic in San Mateo County. I visited with her in 2018, and she showed me the prototypes for this work. The goal is to have a statewide, tool. I don't know if ICLS articulated that very well, but that's her goal. I know that that's the goal behind this effort.
Interesting. I think that would be a factor for me in the level of funding that would be appropriate. If this is going to be a statewide tool and they have buy-in from other agencies in terms of development, then I think I'd be more open to a discussion. But if it's just something they're developing for their in-house agency, I don't think it has the reach to justify that sort of budget.
The application doesn't speak.
Well, Bill, the other part of it is they said that this app is based on existing software, and so we had some questions about why they have to spend $34,000 to develop an app that's based on existing software that they said is being used elsewhere. I assume that meant in some other states. I think they did say in other states. So, I see your point, and I understood it to be something that they wanted to share once they developed it, but it just didn't pass my smell test. Maybe I'm just a little defensive on this, but it just didn't seem right.
There were a lot of elements in this.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm going to trust your nose on this. I just wanted to indicate that for me, statewide efforts seem really appealing, and if they were working towards that, I would be more interested. But it's work. It's work to bring all of those people together and get their feedback so that you develop a useful tool that can be used by others, as opposed to something that's just for yourself. So if there are issues of trust, then we obviously want to dive in deeper and have a better understanding before considering anything.
Part of the concern is that there were other elements in the budget that also seem questionable in terms of administrative load and some other pieces that just felt.
I backed all the administrative stuff they said they put in there. I backed it all out. It was like 50 grand altogether or something like that, if I recall correctly. So
that's about right. Yeah.
May I ask a question? This is Elizabeth. Justice Murray, if there's an issue that you would like staff to follow up on specifically to make you feel more comfortable with this application, can you let us know? What we should do?
Dan already did. Dan got what he could get out of them. I think on that, it wasn't all that transparent from what I understand, and so we gave them a shot at it early on back in May or whenever before we had our first meeting on it. So, yeah.
We do have another shot to take. And Justice Murray, the committee agreed earlier that we're going to give organizations a chance to revise their applications on the basis of what comes out of today's conversation, so that we can learn more about what this would look like at this level. And, you know, if there's a real core there of services, it'll go forward. If we're just funding other stuff, they might decide to put their efforts elsewhere. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you could go back and ask them more about it. I wish they had been straightforward about it before now. Whatever we get out of them now, I just wonder about the credibility of that. So, but anyway, those are my thoughts.
You know, it's a similar issue that we have with the Neighborhood Legal Services proposal for the stabilizing families. It's the last of our tier 3s, I think, that we don't have an agreed recommendation. And Christine, could you possibly go over there to lines 19 and 20 and give us fill in the $100,000 for those last two? That'd be a Riverside Legal Aid and a San Luis Obispo. But Neighborhood Legal Services is currently looking at a range of 0 to 113. And that wide range is because there was lack of clarity what the services would consist of and how the funds were actually going to be spent. There's a big allocation for driving between the two courthouses when the project doesn't involve doing that ever. There's description of goals that don't match up with the services provided. Neighborhood Legal Services is a very skilled provider of self-help services, and guardianship services are a mainstay of self-help services. It seems likely the organization can do a serviceable job of providing these services, but the proposal really didn't inspire much confidence, especially in conjunction with the other two that we received from them that are in a lower category for consideration. So when we look at the proposal for Neighborhood Legal Services and the proposal that's coming along with it in Tier 3 for continuation funding for the Public Counsel Guardianship Clinic, that's, I think, going into its 8th year and is asking for $60,000. The question that we discussed last time was whether to continue investing in a long-standing operation that's really robust, or to turn toward seed funding for a new project that we have questions about. The question hasn't been resolved yet, and I was wondering if people have any thoughts today.
Well, this is Lisa Jaskell. I spoke quite a bit at the last meeting, but once again, if we look toward the interests of the recipients of the services, they seem to be best served by a provider that knows what it's doing and has a track record and is competent. I don't particularly see the value of defunding an organization that has a proven track record and knows what it's doing, simply in the interest of providing seed funding for an organization that lacks those components.
This is Catherine, and just to, I reviewed this with Christina and Dan, the public council project, and they were established in 2001. There might be different iterations, so the project may say 7 years versus 11 years. But there was a question about if the budget matched up with the staffing allocation, the FTEs correctly, and so they did go back and adjusted it to where it looked like there was almost a one full-time attorney using other funding, if you remember, Dan. And it was a mistake, so they evened it out to the point where it is now, it makes more sense. There's a half FTE for the lawyers with other state bar monies, and then 0.5 FTE for other funding, non-state bar monies, as opposed to 1 FTE with all non-state bar monies. So that cleared it up a little bit on the budget aspect. It does
so they're asking for 60 from us. What's the total budget then on the new revision?
Still 60. They just clarified where the other money was going because it didn't really match up that well with what they were allocating versus the staffing chart.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we should come back to this neighborhood legal services when we get to public counsel and we see what we're looking at in terms of the money.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm gonna on my little version over here, I'm gonna put a red highlighter on this square so I don't forget to come back to it. But
so are all of the other number 1s filled in?
Let's scroll up and take a look. I believe that they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
So it looks like at this point we have allocated $1.559 million. We're about $111,000 over our total, I believe. Make sure that right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can scroll to the group 2 proposals and start by filling in the ones that have, well, do we have any that start with a 0, that have a 0? None, huh? Is it still a good idea for us just to fill in the top number at this point?
Yeah, because we can go back and shave it off if we need to.
Let's do that then. I'm going to do this on my sheet while Christine does this on our screen. But that's $34,000 for the Community Legal Aid SoCal Community Court Clinic. That's $70,000 for the Domestic Violence Pro Per Clinic. $60,000 for JDC SASH. $60,000 for, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. That was $25,000. I'm sorry, for family violence, right? 25 for family violence, 60 for JDC SASH, and legal assistance for seniors guardianship would be another 65,000. There's only one left. That's San Diego Volunteers at 100. Oh, I'm sorry. No, there's Public Law Center guardianship for $40,000. Those guys do a nice job. And then $100,000 for the San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program TRO Clinic. There we go. So we now have a balance remaining of $522,000 for the Tier 3 projects. That was pretty efficient.
And NLS, remember?
And NLS. Thank you, yes. Perhaps we can start with the ones that have a range and just see what we think about them before we look at the ones that start with a 0? Or is there any of these that people want to pull out of order?
How much money do we have left? 500?
Yeah, about $550,000. $520,000.
3, 4. Okay.
So
we only have to eliminate $7,000. Is that, am I reading that correct?
Let's see. We are currently, if we stick with our high range, we're $111,000 over. If we just put everything down at the high range that it's currently at. We have several that are zeros though, so we don't have to do that. If we just put in the ones that do have a range, we'd be spending another, well, $250,000 basically. That's what we'd have left then, $250 for everything that's left.
And Dan, I apologize, but I think that Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, LaFleur's Torrance Self-Help Center it's applying for its second year funding. So even though it's tier 3 with what marked as existing services, it may be fair to treat it as a group tier 2 because it's in applying for its second year funding.
You know, I think that effectively we could do that. We have the discretion to look at what is it, long-standing, high-functioning urban projects. They haven't demonstrated an ability to raise money, and in fact, LAF was a very well-funded organization. This is a project that previously got 5 years of partnership grants, 15 years ago. But we do have the money to fund them, and they are here at a range. So if we wanted, and this is a suggestion, if we wanted to go into this chart and for everything that's got a range, which would just be JDC, LACPA, and LAFLA, we could just fill in that, that number if we felt comfortable with funding these projects. I think that they're in range tier 3 here essentially for technical reasons, but if there's any concerns about any of them, I think that this is the time to talk about them.
I just want to address it. LACPA, there was a concern last time about them helping both sides, and I spoke with LACPA, and they help anybody that the court refers to them, and the court refers both sides. And they also have it in their training manual how to address respondents, and they have a protocol if both sides show up at the same time. In addition, that they noted that they are revising or creating a new website. So one, it's easier to find what they do, but also make it very clear that, you know, while they are an organization that helps victims, they are there for anybody that needs assistance.
This is another project that's been in operation since I think the year 2000 or maybe 1990. And they've only recently come to us for funding. That doesn't really make them a new project, but they're here with a range, and we have the option of just filling in the high range for these projects and taking a harder look at the ones where we started with a 0. Is there a better way for us to proceed at this point?
Maybe they should get the low range. I mean, they're not that much different, really, the spreads, but but since there's 3,
I got to say that actually is a very sensible suggestion. Wish I'd said it. Is that something that we have some consensus to go forward and just fill in our chart with low range numbers on these?
Because it looks like we're going to have to go into the 2s and cut a little bit too.
Well, we could just really be firm with the others. There's a few left over in the range 3 that, you know, the high number is really high. So Christine, could you please fill in for line 36, JDC Flash Care, $40,000? For the next line down, LACPA, let's give them, put in $91,000. Recommend $91,000. And then for LAFLA, we'll recommend $90,000. This brings us down to $300,000 left to spend. And I think 4 projects that we have yet to address. You know, the first projects I read, when we got this giant stack of proposals, the first ones I grabbed were from Neighborhood Legal Services. I thought, I'm going to have to learn these ones pretty well. And they're the last ones we talk about. Does anyone have a preference where we begin with these 3 projects from Neighborhood Legal Services and the Public Counsel Guardianship Clinic? I'll recap the other 2 briefly. NLS's Consumer Tech Project is operating out of the Chatsworth Courthouse, and they're talking about adding some consumer and tech components to an existing self-help service that they've been running for a long time. The MOU that they submitted, I think, is dated in 2012, and it's still in operation. The the Housing Cases Continuum of Services project is operating out of the Pasadena Courthouse. They also have an MOU. I can't tell what they're doing differently about this particular housing project, except that they're trying to integrate more closely with some of the other services in the courtroom or the courthouse. They're really, you know, repackaged existing services from an organization that has a very good track record of helping a lot of people pretty efficiently. The proposals are rich. They're asking for a lot of admin and support. These are high numbers for us.
And Dan, you were saying that the NLS project that's in Tier 1 has a lot of overlap with the public counsel program?
Well, it is running parallel. They kind of operate at different parts of the county. So the Van Nuys component of the NLS guardianship project maybe addresses both people who are going to go to mosque and would be able to use the public counsel project or to go to Antelope Valley. I don't think that Van Nuys and downtown LA are that close together. So I don't know if it's you know, a problem for me. If the demand is there, if people need the services, it probably is a good idea to have them in the north part of the county as well. But yes, it's 2 guardianship projects in the same county.
So we could choose not to fund one of the NLS or else give a lot of projects a haircut. Is that essentially where we're at?
Yeah, we're talking about $628,000 on the high end and $300,000 left to spend. So we need to cut $300,000.
Go ahead, Dan.
Because we need to cut $300,000 off of the top end here somewhere.
We need to cut 300,000?
Well, our
yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. $100,000. Thank you. $100,000.
Well, let's just look at what we've already allocated. So we've got 4 programs and $300,000 left to spend, unless we cut somewhere else, right?
Yes, and you know, we might want to look first at which of the projects that we have the most confidence in. That's one way of looking at it. If these are all projects that are fighting for kind of last place in the considerations, where would we be most confident that our investment would help? When I look at the 4, the smallest request seems to be from the organization that inspires the most confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this discussion. It was technically, they should be rolling off, right? Because they've been funded for so many years.
Our policy gives us discretion to consider funding for projects in excess of 5 years.
Yeah, but this was like 12 or something.
Yes.
As I recall.
But with the exception of the guardianship, the NLS guardianship project, all of them are. They're all in the same boat.
They're all like that.
Yeah. Well, the Pasadena and the Chatsworth projects are also very long-standing.
So, well, it sounds like we should go plug in a number in that NLS guardianship if they're tier 1.
Okay, so
and you're saying that you need, you know, it's not unduly overlapping and the services are needed.
That's persuasive. If we were to look here at line 12, the Neighborhood Legal Services Stabilizing Families Project, their ask is $113,000. This also includes a lot of money for mileage and things. I didn't do a deep drill to pull out admin because the budget was very confusing and I didn't really, I don't think it reflected the activities. But looking at the other budgets, I believe that there's room for economization. We don't necessarily have to fund it fully.
Yeah.
Would it be a preference to fund fully, or are we looking at something between 0 and 113?
I mean, I would want a little more detail on what they're doing with all the money, but I would tend not to think I would want to fund it fully, just based on the economy of it. I would like to see them do more with less.
We can put in 100. It's kind of consistent with some of the other ones.
I was floating in that direction myself, but I wouldn't call it a staff recommendation, but we landed on the same spot. Would there be an objection to our putting $100,000 into this box here for NLS's new Stabilizing Families project? I'm gonna, Christine, could you pop that in to that box as well? And we'll see what that does to where we're at. $200,000 left to spend. If our decision on NLS was with respect to it not being excessively overlapping, does that mean that there's comfort in continuing to fund the public council project?
Well, can I ask a question on this one really quick, the Stabilizing Families? When I look at their budget, they want to hire one attorney full time, and then I realized I just misread it. Okay.
You know, if you read it really carefully, you'll still be confused.
Okay. So public council. So we decided to cut it in half, based I think on the Stabilizing Families NLS program. Was that my recollection from our last?
Actually, I think that recommendation was independent of the NLS assessment. They came out of different review teams, and the public council recommendation was because that matches what they got this year. And we told them this year, you shouldn't expect to be refunded. So they came back and asked for twice as much, which seemed a little audacious. And the recommendation was, we represent a portion of a very large project there. They should be able to sustain it with this much support. If there's a sense that the $60,000 is a better choice, the committee has the freedom to recommend that.
Well, I'm just curious if we have any further information, because guardianship seems like a really important issue. And I don't want to shortchange them if there is a strong basis for this request.
There are sometimes proposals that come to us saying things like, without this funding, we will close this clinic and terminate these services. This constituency won't be served. That's not what I got out of the public council proposal, and I turned to Christina and to Rin, but they sounded like they were setting the world on fire.
Yeah.
They've got like some new virtual stuff that I want to learn more about. I'm speaking because it was actually assigned to Commissioner Ryan, and I wound up adopting her portfolio. So I read it pretty closely, and I think they're doing pretty good.
I mean, right, proportionally, what they're doing with 30,000, I think Chris Schreiber said the last meeting, like bang for your buck. And it does seem like there is a large community need, especially with, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the consolidation of LA courts, and there's fewer locations to get to. So it sounds like, I thought it was a strong RFP, and they have a long track record. And I also may have heard that they were encouraged to apply. So we wanted to make sure our messaging is consistent. If this is last year to say, you know, the funding doesn't go for that long, because they may have been encouraged to apply, which contradicts what we're saying here.
I don't know about that encouragement, but well, I don't know about that, but I'm looking at what's left here, the few boxes that are left, and one approach that we could consider would be to split the difference on public counsel. They're asking for 60. It sounds really good. 30 is what they've been at, and we need to split the money between these three projects. As a proposal, if we put $45,000 in that box, you wind up with about 150 left for those two other projects, maybe 75 each, and in that neighborhood. That would give us a chance to sustain important high-functioning projects, and maybe not fund some admin or some you know, parts of the budget that aren't really about core services. As we look at cutting things, taking that 126 and that 113 down to something like 85 and 70 might be a place to go. Open for discussion.
That sounds good to me. Can you put the numbers in there and see what that green number turns into?
Thanks. Yes, please.
Yes, and if Catherine, if we can get feedback before the next meeting on the public counsel and the guardianship clinic, I would be interested in that.
And specifically feedback with respect to whether they're going to be able to keep going?
Yeah.
Public counsel?
Yeah, and maybe justification on why it was such a big ask.
So what are we putting in these two?
Yeah, are we just splitting? Or
yeah, I think you said 85 and 75.
Well, those I was pulling numbers out of a hat.
Yeah.
But perhaps if we put 85 there at consumer technology, we could see what's left.
And I'll go back to the public counsel. I would just noting that $60,000 was a big ask, but the whole project was $384,900.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a small chunk of the overall project, what they're using with other non-state bar monies and state bar.
So, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead. Are we comfortable with where we're landing on public counsel for now as our tentative funding recommendation to go back to the project?
Why did we go above what we said was the high end last meeting?
Last time we looked at this project as one that was in the last, that was basically last in line for funding because they've been around for so long.
Right.
The priorities give us discretion to be more generous toward high functioning projects that have been around for a long time. And because we are now looking at allocating funds between these three projects, one of which seems kind of inherently to give us more for the money than the others, my suggestion was to fund them a little closer to where they were asking, but not quite as much as they were asking.
But more than this year.
But more than this year. If we did otherwise, we would be adding that money to the NLS projects.
Yeah.
And I have no objection to that. I'm just trying to think of the different ways of meeting the committee's interests of supporting high functioning projects and getting services into all parts of the county and the state. If we were to put a $30,000 number in that line, we'd have $86,000 left to spend. Or I'm sorry, not 86.
Yep.
Well, except that we've already put another number on one of those other lines, right? We shouldn't put that 85 on line 40 yet.
The public has requested 60,000 ever since 2015. So over the years, slowly go up 60,
with the
45, now to 30. So maybe they just always default to asking for 60. They're getting less every year, except now we're looking at going back up.
So if we put a 30 in as the recommended for public council, then we'd have 171 left for the remaining two projects. And those projects are $239,000 together. If we funded the consumer technology project at $100,000, which is really high for us, we don't go up that high often and rarely over it, we'd still have 71 left.
How about 90 and 81?
90 and 81?
Yeah. I think that works.
Wow. It does work. Man, I love Excel.
Can I ask on the consumer technology project? Are these requests for the 2 FTE attorneys? Like that's a reasonable request for the hours that we're getting, Monday through Friday, 8:30 till I guess noon.
With consumer work, a lot of it comes back to the office and requires more follow-up than a lot of the other kinds of cases that come through self-help projects. So I don't know exactly what this is going to look like. It is sort of framed as a new proposal, but if it's consistent with other similar projects, they'll probably need to do a lot of work outside of clinical hours to move the cases forward.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that.
Because it's usually the plaintiff is some sort of collection agency or big corporation, and their MO is just to bury you in procedures and paperwork. So you've got to like file discovery and answer discovery and file motions.
Yeah. So maybe I think I was misled by the name, which sounds like a rebranding of that. The technology part wasn't very clear to me, but that
Nor
core
to me,
piece
honestly.
sounds okay.
I'm starting to lose my voice, but I want to be mindful of time. We're actually about on time. It's 1:45 to noon, and we've allocated $245,000. Is that what we allocated?
2 million.
I'm sorry. I'm seeing recommendation total 2.45. I think that our spreadsheet didn't allocate in the additional $100,000. Is that possible? This is line J46.
Oh.
So let me just make sure.
Oh, there's something wrong with maybe the formula down below.
Yeah, I'm fixing that now.
So we have another 100,000.
642. And then that's I see what happened here.
Yeah, I see it too.
So let's talk about if there's another $100,000 that we need to spend here. We gave almost everybody what they were asking for.
Well, Dan, we didn't give everybody exactly what they're asking for. A lot of it, we gave a lot of the high ranges, which for some of them isn't exactly what they asked for.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's a really good point. Let's take a look at the tier 1 projects and see if there are any that asked for more than they received. For example, the guardianship clinic in Fresno asked for 73, but was awarded 60. There's room for enhancement there.
Yeah, but when we came up with these ranges, weren't there reasons?
Yeah.
The reasons were partly due to how much money we thought we had. The initial recommendation was at a 2.45 million, and now we're up to 2.55. So there's a little bit more freedom. I don't think that we necessarily want to give everybody everything they asked for, but there are probably some projects, and I'm trying to find some that asked for more than they were awarded, but really there's not that many. We get to tier 2 and I see that, you know, there's $1,000 here or there. The Justice and Diversity Center in San Francisco has asked for a lot more than we were offering them. And also the San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program asked for $130,000, which is a huge ask. Public Law Center also has asked for a little bit more. If we were to look at some of these projects that I've just mentioned, to start off, for example, with Central California Legal Services guardianship project that's asking for $73,000 and is allocated tentatively for a $60,000 grant.
Yeah, Dan, I'm not sure if this is the best example of one, because we went down to 60 thinking that was actually kind of generous given the services for clinic hours. And we did go back to get more clarity around the supervision of the paralegal, and there is a lot more interaction in the offices with the staffing attorney and the paralegal are across the hall from each other. So there's a lot of interaction there. So that was reassuring to hear that there are some more control factors in place than what the RFP initially was drafted as. But I don't think it justifies maybe any more than 60,000 given their goals and objectives. I think they do 70 individuals.
Oh, yeah, this was mine. That I wouldn't up this one. There was a reason why the recommendation wasn't what they asked for, because they're not doing that much.
That's great to know. Not about
and that's
them.
one of my questions on the rest of these.
Yeah, and that's why I want to take a look at them. Where's the variance and why? For example, Community Legal Aid Orange County, we gave them we're recommending 34 instead of the 35 they requested. I don't know if that was on the basis of anything other than being concerned that we needed to stretch the money. But Will, that was your project. Is that something that you think has room for a different allocation?
You're looking at the community court in Orange?
The Orange County Community Court asked for 35. We're recommending 34. And just before we give them less than they asked for, is that something we want to just adjust up since there's money to spend?
I would be comfortable with that. I don't remember any major specific concerns about that one.
We'll just make sure they're not doing expungement work, but that's an easy one to handle. There was the Justice.
I guess that's the.
The Justice and Diversity Center in San Francisco, the Shriver Sash project, they're losing the Shriver piece. And there is probably going to be a lot more pressure on the Sash piece because of that. People who previously might have gotten a representation are going to have to self-represent. So our allocation here was for $60,000. Our recommendation was $60,000 for a $74,000 request. I believe that this was Chris Shriver's.
No, it was mine, Dan.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
The original request was 74,000.
Yes, yes.
And we gave him 60. Now I'm just looking at my notes here. I honestly didn't go back to look at these because I didn't think we'd be giving more money today. Thought we were going in other directions. So let me just glance at this real quick. Yeah, they didn't, I think the thing on this was they didn't serve that many people last year because they lost the attorney that they had working for them.
They've had a lot of funding staffing discontinuities, but yeah. I do think that with the Shriver piece gone, it'll be easier for them to maintain what's there, and it'll be more important.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I think that's right. So yeah, you want to bring them back up to 74 or something closer to that?
I'm gonna type that into my draft sheet here. Christine, could you bring JDC back up to 74? Thank you. And that's a JDC SASH project.
Yeah, SASH. Because they haven't.
There's also the Legal Assistance for Seniors partnership to assist conservatorship litigants. That's they asked for 65 and we recommended 60. Offhand, I can't remember who read that one. Judge Jaskell. Did you have any thoughts as to whether 60 was the right number, or was that the number we chose because we didn't think we had more?
So let's see. So I think there was some issue about the lack of income restrictions. Did that get addressed? Even their revised proposal, when they came back, said they had no income restrictions. There were no income restrictions officially stated, and so I think that was my main issue. My main concern.
We're the only funding for this project, right? I think they have other funding.
I don't remember.
Yeah. So I think that maybe we need to use our return to the programs to ask if this project was funded at a given level, could you do it with income restrictions?
Right. They say that yeah. Otherwise, it looks like a fine program.
I think on that one as well, was this the one where they had requested more than they had received last year?
Initially in they had asked last year for 98,000 and were awarded 60,000. That was last year.
Okay.
And then this year, let's see, So, yeah.
So they're asking for 65 instead of 60.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of people looking for this service from them who don't qualify, but there are some. So I think it's important to make sure that those restrictions are clear. And if they can't move forward with the project with those restrictions, then we need to report back to you about it. Do we feel as if they can meet the restrictions, would they be able to use the $65,000?
Probably, yeah.
I'm going to type that in. And Christine, could you also type that in? I'm going to make a note about restrictions to make sure that the follow-up happens. And I'm also going to scan down and acknowledge we're at $2.47 million. We have a bunch of money yet to distribute, and we've only got 5 minutes left before the commission meeting starts. So I invite suggestions as to how we should address the surplus funding here.
Well, we aren't making recommendations to the commission until the August meeting. So we do have an opportunity to meet again in July. I think we were trying to schedule something mid-July. So I don't think there's time to try to schedule that in this meeting, but I think Dan will follow up to do that. And so it probably will also be helpful once staff has additional information on how COVID has impacted the applicants. And we may want to shift the numbers a little bit in July. Does that sound comfortable?
Yeah.
I love it. So the plan is that staff will go back to the grantees with these tentative allocations, ask them if they'd like to revise their budget and what that's going to look like, and to make sure that they'd be able to move forward. If there's any projects that seem like they are particularly robust or could use more funding than we've recommended, we'll put an asterisk next to those for consideration for any additional funding that we've got left over, and perhaps provide a staff recommendation.
Sounds good.
Thank you all so much. Christine, Madam Chair, I think that we're actually at that last slide of our PowerPoint. Were there any other matters that we needed to make sure we talked about before the next meeting starts in 3.5 minutes? Perhaps it's time for a motion to adjourn.
Sounds good.
So move. This is Kim.
Seconded.
All in favor?
I think by acclamation.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for your thoughts. This is really productive. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Well done.